Welcome to News Around, the channel that unpacks the feelings behind the flashbulbs. If you value stories that move beyond gossip into the human truth, subscribe now, hit the join button to support us, and don't forget to like and comment. Today we bring you a scene that unfolded in plain sight yet felt like a private reckoning, a declaration from a beloved actor that stopped a nation and rewrote a private future. It happened without warning on an evening meant for charity and quiet applause. Cameras clustered like curious birds at the curb. Reporters, clutching notebooks and wired mics, expected the usual, rehearsed smiles, short remarks, maybe a photo op. Instead, a man well versed in on-screen impersonations abandoned his scripts and spoke as himself, raw, speech softened, and irrevocable. At the threshold of flashing lenses, he paused. The words he offered were part Turkish, part confession, and entirely disarming. In those few syllables he folded distance and time, revealing an intention that had been kept private until it could no longer be contained. He spoke of a desire not for headlines but for a home, not for spectacle but for the intimate work of staying, of two people choosing to remain together and of a child who would one day know safety rather than scandal. He did not utter the name that everyone had already guessed, yet the whole exchange was shorthand. The press corps and the public understood whom his heart named without a single explicit reference. When asked whether he meant reconciliation, marriage, or simply readiness for fatherhood, he gave an answer that refused narrow labels. He spoke instead of responsibility and of the kind of courage that admits imperfection and still chooses the shared path. For many, the shock of seeing a public figure so unguarded was a jolt in a world of performances. For others, his admission served as a quiet remedy to cynicism, proof that public lives retain private possibility. Immediately, reactions surged online, messages of admiration, tweets that equated the admission with emotional bravery, and debates about whether such public declarations are authentic at all. Yet beyond the noise, something more subtle unfolded, an intimate reply that needed no stage. Around them, the public supplied commentary in torrents. Supporters urged trust, strangers offered benedictions, and skeptics wondered if the performance spilled from public relations. But one simple, carefully staged social post followed a spare, hand-lettered sentence on a blank backdrop, a declaration that family is less an event than a daily decision. That image was small and deliberate, it minimized spectacle and maximized meaning. For those watching closely, the gesture read as intentional restraint, not calculated drama. Silence sometimes says more than any boast. He chose restraint that night. He did not call to demand forgiveness, nor did he flood the inbox with pleas. Instead, a photograph slipped into her feed, a man's hand resting lightly on an infant garment, paired with a short note that translated to "Daddy is ready." The message required no signature. The promise, tender and uncluttered, exceeded the need for explanation. She moved then, moved as if her body had been waiting for a permission she had not allowed herself to grant. The drive was not cinematic, it was mechanical. Stoplights became meditative beats, streets blurred, breath shortened into resolve. Standing on his doorstep later, she found there was nothing left to rehearse. The door opened, eyes met, and the complicated ledger of their shared history fell away for a moment beneath the immediacy of presence. Words were unnecessary. He offered instead an acceptance that did not push for confession or justification. He allowed her the space to arrive without explanation. In that quiet act the shape of healing appeared, not as a rush to promises but as the willingness to simply be together in the same room. She let herself be contained by his embrace in a surrender that felt like a reprieve. The tears she let fall that night were not an unraveling but a loosening of the knot she had carried so long. Morning arrived not with proclamations but with soft, domestic reality. She woke to the sun finding them, to the familiar smallness of a sofa becoming a refuge, to the casual intimacy of his hand on her abdomen. He did not insist on immediate vows. Instead, he offered simple tenderness, an acknowledgement of three present souls, a phrase spoken in mixed language that made the moment feel both private and universal. "Today there are three of us," he said, and the words landed with the weight of futurity. It is worth pausing on that detail, the absence of theatricality. No staged engagement ring, no public announcement. What happened instead was the beginning of an ordinary recommitment, a reconstruction of trust through daily acts rather than headline-making ceremonies. He did not ask her to forget, he asked, gently, to face forward. From the vantage of a broader cultural conversation, this episode reveals a longing, the desire for honesty in a media landscape that often trades depth for drama. It mattered less what label they might choose, relationship, marriage, or mutual caretaking, and more that they were creating a bedrock for a child's life. He framed his intentions not as grand gestures but as fundamental obligations, to stand together for the boy who would someday open his eyes into a world where adults made room for love and for mistakes. As the day waned, their reconciliation, tentative, hopeful, and carefully guarded, invited questions from viewers. Do second chances hold if both parties carry old pains? Can a child flourish amid the complexity of adults who are learning how to stay? The comments poured in. People shared personal stories of reconciliation and cautionary tales, which transformed the moment into a mirror for viewers' own experiences. News Around wants to know your take. Do you believe repair is possible when both parties commit genuinely? Which celebrities would you like us to cover next in a story about second chances and family rebuilding? Tell us in the comments below. Your voice matters on this channel. If this story moved you, please hit like and subscribe to News Around. Click the join button if you'd like to support our reporting and receive exclusive updates. Your engagement keeps these human stories alive and helps us tell them with care. What followed in the private hours after their reunion was not spectacle but slow reconnect ion. They spent time talking, but more often they simply existed in proximity, cooking in the same kitchen, sharing silences, listening to the irregular breathing of the household that would soon widen to include a child. During these ordinary acts, both confronted discrepancies between desire and habit. He acknowledged past mistakes not as confessions shouted across a room but as quiet truths offered so they could be worked on. She answered with questions born of need rather than accusation, requests for consistency, clarity, and kindness. A public relationship reshaped in private will always be vulnerable to misinterpretation. Yet it is also true that many of the most resilient unions are built upon repeated small choices rather than dramatic visuals. This arc of a public man stepping into private accountability may not produce banner headlines long term, but it can create the conditions for a lasting, grounded family life. In a culture that often rewards spectacle, choosing the slow, low-key, and sincere is itself a radical act. Now we turn the conversation to you. Do you think this is the start of something real, or just another chapter in a celebrity narrative? Who would you like News Around to cover next? Which public figures' personal journeys should we follow with sensitivity and depth? Comment below, and while you're there, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. If you want to support our work directly, press the join button. Every membership helps us keep bringing these human stories from behind the headlines. Thank you for watching News Around, where compassion meets curiosity. Keep your hearts open, your judgments measured, and your conversations kind.